Hello. Welcome to AP Language and Composition with Mrs. Bowden. I'm Mrs. Bowden. I have been the AP Language and Comp teacher here for the last 7 years. And actually, this year is the first year where the only class I'm teaching is AP Language and Composition, and I'm very excited about that. AP Language and Comp is my favorite class to teach, and we'll get into why that is, but I am very enthusiastic about it. It is my favorite curriculum to go over. I love how much current events and how many different thematic units go into it. So we'll get a little bit more into that in a bit, but I just want you to know how sincerely enjoyable I find this course and how much I hope your kids really get to take from this because, again, it is a really interesting and very different English class than they've ever had before. So speaking of different, this is also one of the most different years we've ever had before. The way we communicate is very different this year. So one of the primary ways we use to communicate is Zoom, which I'm sure you've heard and probably use for your own work, etc. So Zoom is a conferencing app that we use regularly to converse with them over video, specifically for our students who are fully remote, but also when our students are hybrid and at home. So there are a couple rules about video etiquette and virtual school etiquette that we'll go over in a little bit, but Zoom is the main way I communicate with your students when they're home. Google Classroom is the biggest component we have for our online learning. So it's where I will be posting notes. It's where I'll be posting any materials they need. It's also where I'll be posting assignments. So students are able to sign up. Obviously, they've all been added to my Google Classroom already. If you would like to join their Google Classroom as a guardian, you just have to email me at nbowden@rutherfordschools.org, and I'd be happy to add you to it. And extra help. So in our afternoon hours, we are available to the students. So we're available from 12:18 to 3:02. Our lunch is technically 12:18 to 1:20, but we are always willing to make ourselves available for the student because we're here, we're in the building. So anytime between 12:18 and 3:02, I'm happy to meet with your student. I just, as I explained to them in class, would like for them to email me and let me know what time works best for them. And I can happily get online and help them with whatever it is that they need in terms of their assignments or education. So let's talk about AP Language. So AP Language is a course that primarily deals in nonfiction. So the entire course is built in thematic units. The very first thematic unit we're doing is the American Dream, which I know is a theme they've heard over and over again and again. But what's interesting in our approach to the American Dream is that we're not focusing on a failed American dream like in Gatsby or how elusive the American dream can be like in Of Mice and Men. We're looking at the American dream as it exists today. And the American dream exists very differently for each individual. We read a number of different works. We look at current events. We read a number of essays and articles from the textbook that you see a picture of here. It's a very large textbook. So if your student is fully remote, they have this very large textbook at home called The Language of Composition. For those students who are in and out of the classroom, I have a PDF version of this as well, which is what is uploaded onto Classroom for them, and I provide excerpts for them as well because the textbook is considered a shared material and something we can't currently use in this climate. We also have a number of additional selections from outside sources such as newspapers, magazines, journals. I actually also incorporate podcasts into my units. I feel that podcasts are just a very relevant and interesting way for students to reflect and gain information and vocabulary. I'm a huge proponent of vocabulary for a lot of reasons. Our test has a number of pre-20th century texts on it, and I want our students to be as familiar as possible with those vocabulary words they're going to come across. I also find it very helpful in preparation for the SAT or ACT, whichever standardized test they plan on taking. And that is the primary sources we'll be using this year. It is an odd year. So typically I try to incorporate a number of fictional works into it. I will try my best to do that. But with the condensed amount of time we have in the classroom, I'm not sure how much I'll be able to do. So stay tuned. But if we're able to, we would love to cover The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. We have a number of novels that would be great to incorporate, but what's most important to me right now is to make sure they're getting the skills they need for the test that we're preparing for. So speaking of the test, our test date is May 12th, Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. As of now, the College Board is telling us to prepare our students for a full-length paper-based in-person test. I just said a lot of things I could change at any moment. So last year, during the height of the pandemic, we had our students take a very shortened version of the test. It was 45 minutes to write one of the essays. Over the course of the year, we go over 3 different essay styles. So they had selected one type of essay, and the students took it from home. They could handwrite it, they could type it on the computer. It had to be submitted within 45 minutes. As of right now, today, they're saying that we will be able to do a complete full-length test. So what does that mean for you? The test is broken into 2 sections. The AP language test is the longest of all the tests. It's not the hardest of all the tests. It is the most popular of all the tests. We have over 1 million kids take it internationally every year. A few million kids take it internationally every year. And it is meant to assess a student's skills. So this is not a content-based test. This isn't memorization. This isn't anything to do with flashcards or formulas or knowing terms. This is a skills-based test. So what we're working on over the course of the next 6 months that I have them before they take this exam is honing those skills through critical reading, through multiple writing assignments. There's a lot of different ways we'll be working on their skills. So it's a 3.5-hour test. I said 3.5 hours. The first hour is multiple choice questions. So they have 45 questions to answer in an hour. They'll have 5 passages to read, so about 9 questions per passage. A big part of what we work on in this class is time management under a test or stress situation. I also, on behalf of the kids, because this is an anxiety-inducing experience, I don't count multiple choice as a grade for the first marking period. I don't want them to be worried. I don't want them to be so stressed that they maybe search for answers elsewhere. I want them to answer the question to the best of their ability so that I get a better sense of where their strengths and weaknesses lie. So for the first marking period, the multiple choice will never count as a grade for them. And I think that alleviates some of the stress that goes into it. So we'll be working for the multiple choice, which is also very similar to some of the multiple choice they see on the SAT. So it's kind of a 2 birds, 1 stone situation. They then get a 15-minute break. Then starts their 2 hours and 15 minutes of essay writing. Over the course of those 2 hours and 15 minutes, they're going to have to write 3 different styles of essays. They'll start with the synthesis essay, they'll go into the rhetorical analysis essay, and then they'll write an argumentative essay. There are 3 different types of writing styles. We'll be covering each writing style every marking period. So marking period 1, we focus on rhetorical analysis. It's the ones that they typically have the least experience with. It's also the essay that's on the SAT. The rhetorical analysis essay is the SAT essay. So it's, again, a kind of a didactic approach to their essay writing. That's going to help them on the SAT. When they take the PSAT, if they choose to take the SAT in the spring, they're already going to be way ahead of the curve in terms of the SAT writing. So we'll start with rhetorical analysis because they're the least familiar with it. We move on to synthesis because it's the most time-consuming one, the one where we need to really hone those time management skills. And then we end with the argumentative essay because honestly, they enjoy the argument essay, and we can do a lot of fun stuff with it. So politically, thematically, pop culture unit we do with it. There's a lot we can do with the argument essay, and it kind of eases us into taking this really long test. Our grading breakdown. The grading breakdown for my class is the same as it will be for AP Lit should they choose to take AP Lit. So class participation is 10%, homework is 15%, quizzes are 20%, and a quiz can be vocab, multiple choice sections when they eventually count as a grade, and reading checks, which I don't use very often. I don't find the need to do that in AP class. Tests and projects are 25%. That could be a practice AP exam. It could be a unit test. For the first 2 marking periods, it's primarily projects because, again, I don't want to put the pressure on them of taking an AP test when they don't have all the skills yet for it. And finally, writing assignments. This is a writing-based class. Your students are going to do an immense amount of writing. It's not an overwhelming amount of writing, meaning that they're not going to be sent home every night with writing. The predominant amount of writing happens during class time because I need them to get used to being a writer in a time setting. So there's a good amount of writing in this class. The majority of my students that I've had in the past feel that they become much more effective writers. Their writing is more organized. They find that they are more cohesive in what they're saying and that they feel that their writing has a very clear message. And that's really what we're working towards as we continue throughout the course of the year. So here's what I want them to take from my class, and this is why I love my class. What I want a student to take from my class is the knowledge of rhetoric. All right, so rhetorical understanding, not only of the pieces we read, which can be from the pre-20th century or they could be more modern. What I really want them to understand is how is the knowledge of rhetoric and its application useful to their lives today? I mean, we're in an election year. There's so much that we can say and do that have to do with rhetoric, and it's going to be a lot of fun to do it. How does the information presented in the course make you a better consumer of mediated messages? I want every one of these students to leave my class feeling that they can competently and confidently understand and discern the message of any work that they get, of any message that they get. I have them begin evaluating commercials, advertisements, speeches, the news as it's presented from any news source. So I just want them to become much better consumers of mediated messages. We get bombarded by information every day. I mean, think about how much they see in terms of advertisements, even just looking at TikTok or looking at Instagram or looking at Twitter, or even the sources that any of that information is coming from. I want them to be better consumers of that media. I want them to have a stronger understanding of why they should question where it's coming from, or why we need to look at the credibility or logos, the facts that go with it. So that's a huge skill that I want them to carry beyond my class. And I strongly encourage them to do that. How does knowledge of rhetoric enable you to effectively use information and communicate? I mean, on the flip side of that, how can they become effective communicators? Your kids. And I've seen a huge change in the last 15 years I've been teaching, from students who will come and talk to me about a problem to a student who would rather email me, who doesn't feel comfortable effectively communicating person to person. And I want them to become better at that. I want them to feel more confident in what they have to say and saying it in a way that they feel that they are heard and understood. And finally, how does the information presented in the course further your understanding of society and your role in it? We cover a lot of different topics this year. We do an entire unit on justice. We do a unit on the American dream. If we have time, which unfortunately I ran out of last year, we do a unit on gender. So these are real issues that exist in our society today. These are issues that they are bombarded with through all different forms of media. And I want them to feel comfortable asking questions and understanding maybe where their role is in it, or do they have a role in it, or maybe just feeling comfortable, asking harder questions. So these are all things that I really want them to take from my class. And again, I know every single teacher tells you that you're going to need this when you grow up, or that this is something that's important for you to know when you're older. But I truly think that my class does provide a lot of those skills. And I'm honored that that's the type of class I get to teach. So virtual learning etiquette, we can quickly go through this, but our school year is virtual. Whether your student is in person or not, the primary avenue for us to get information to our students is virtual. There's not a lot of hard copies going out. Your students, if they are hybrid, aren't getting textbooks like they normally would. So there's a lot going on in terms of virtual learning that we just want to make sure that everyone's aware of. So first of all, virtual learning is still learning. As we move into virtual learning, our students are going to be participating in online virtual settings for educational purposes. We're going to have audio, video conferencing. While you have signed our district acceptable use policy detailing the appropriate use behavior while working with technology, it is important to share information with you about what our online setting looks like. So, you may be visible or audible to other participants, students, and Rutherford staff. There are times when I might project the Zoom class onto the smartboard so that students can see one another and interact with one another in a bit. So you're going to be visible. Your student is going to be visible. So we just want them aware that where they are visible should be appropriate, and that they should also be active and engaged during those lessons. The first thing we need to, again, mention is they're in class. Even if it's not a classroom, even if you're currently Zooming from your couch, which I'm highly jealous of, even if you're home, it's still your classroom. So we expect that the content and videos that are used in remote experiences won't be copied, altered, or redistributed to anybody. We are trusting that our students are being respectful of one another in these Zoom experiences. It's our expectation that our students will engage in a successful and productive learning experience via Zoom. And if we ever feel the need to do so, participants can and will be removed from a session if deemed necessary. I haven't and don't anticipate this problem in an AP class, but should something happen that is inappropriate or needs to be dealt with, we will take appropriate disciplinary action for it. Virtual learning etiquette for our kids and what we want you to know about your kids. Make sure they show up on time. Attendance matters, and it is taken period by period. Work in a quiet area with the fewest distractions possible, siblings, pets, television, etc. I admit that I found that challenging when I was home. I have a very goofy and lovable golden retriever and a 3-year-old toddler who, you've all had 3-year-olds, obviously, because you now have 16 and 17-year-olds, is very demanding of attention. So work in the best capacity you can, but also please know that I'm very understanding, and I'm happy to work with students in whatever capacity they need. If they find it impossible during a class session to follow along with what we're doing, email me. Let me know you want to set up in the afternoon. Happy to meet with you again to go over things. Be respectful in speaking and writing, and make sure that you're dressing appropriately. Stay on mute until you're willing to contribute, but keep your camera on. We are asking students to keep their cameras on so that we have a clear line of vision on them. Limit your movement. We don't want it to be too distracting, and be conscious of what and who is in your background. And in terms of the audio, you want to consider using a headset with an external mic, and chat features always welcome as well. So again, I hope you gained a lot of information about AP Language and Comp. Again, I just want to reiterate how much I enjoy teaching this class and how much I really hope your student gets to take a lot from it. If you have any questions or concerns over the course of the school year, please don't hesitate to reach out at nbowden@rutherfordschools.org, and I'd be happy to get back to you. Thanks.